Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to Tapas Project Shala. I am the conference curator and the founder of Tapas, Preeti Vikram. We are on day 4 of the conference and at the final session of this wonderful 4 days that we've had. We are going to have a great panel discussion, which is about sparking the ANANDA or the joy of learning. Ankita Chandak is the moderator for our panel today, and she is somebody who is a parenting influencer. She and her videos about working with her child using the Montessori method is fantastic, and anybody who is a parent in today's world should be looking at her style of parenting, and something that I personally enjoy watching. So, Ankita, over to you, and hope you lead us into a great discussion.
Thank you so much, Preeti, for the really kind and warm welcome. Very good morning to everyone. Let's start with quick introductions and let's begin with our learner today. Karun, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm. My name is Karun. I'm 12 years old. I've been studying at Tapas for the last 5 years. Uh, Basically, from the start of the school.
All right. Can we go ahead with Shreya?
Yes, so I'm Shreya. I'm 11 and I've been studying at Tapas for 1 year. This is my second year. 1 year or 1 week, I think Tapas will just make your mind get blown. First day I came here, I was just shocked. Like, no crazy notes, no copying from the board. Everyone's allowed to actually talk in class, which is big difference because old school it was you have to maintain so much discipline that even a slight whisper will get you a good scolding from the teachers. So to be honest, I think Tapas has a lot of freedom. Love it here.
I love that you guys have so much freedom. I visited your school early on in February and I was also amazed because it's so unconventional and the way the campus is built and all the interaction. I think overall there was so much movement around that it was really refreshing because children were not chained to desks, and Maria Montessori always spoke about the fact that children are chained to desks in school. So they need more freedom of movement, and absolutely I have interacted with children in Tapas and I truly feel that they are free to flourish, and follow their interests, which is really beautiful. And yes, finally, Anaha and Gokul, please tell us something about yourselves.
Hi there. So Gokul and I are parents to three kids, 7, 5, and 2. We homeschool all three of our kids, and we've been doing so since our eldest was born. They've never been to school or a traditional school. Um, and I think Gokul can also. We moved to India a year ago. We used to live in the U.S. previously. Um, and we started a homeschool center here, a learning center in our home a few months ago.
We're very
Wow.
grateful to Tapas for inviting us to Project Shala and happy to share our experience with homeschooling and some of our underlying philosophy behind why we've done this. So, very excited
Thank
to
you
be
so
here.
much. Yeah, looking forward to hearing from you guys. Where in India are you guys settled now?
Bangalore. We,
Oh, you guys are in Bangalore. Bangalore has a huge homeschooling community, right?
it
It
does,
does a
yes.
wonderful homeschooling community. It makes us feel very happy with the move and very happy to be here.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing. Preeti, is there something you'd like to share before we begin the session?
Uh, the other panelist was unable to join us. It was very unfortunate that she's unwell. I wish that she'd been here. The psychologist part of it. So, any of the questions that you have psychology related, maybe we can field it between Anaha, Gokul, and myself. Maybe we can field that. But conversation will be with Shriya and Karun and the rest of us otherwise.
All right, so let's begin today's session. The first question that I have for all of you, will take turns to answer it, is in your opinion, what is the biggest advantage of project based learning over traditional education? Because TAPA stands for project based learning. And there's so much that your learners are also enthusiastic about. So let's hear it from them. And then we'll hear it from the rest of you. So Shreya, do you want to tell us?
Well, the thing I would enjoy mostly from project-based learning to traditional schools, because I've been in like a bunch of. To be honest, I've changed schools a lot. I've been in one school for maybe 2 or 3 years, and I'm in the next school. But for one, I know Tapas, I'm gonna be here for a long time. So, like the one big difference, of course, was that like it's actually interesting to learn. In my old schools, I would sit, I would groan, I would hate going to school, and I would hate homework. To be honest, I'm still not a huge homework fan, but hey, actually it's super fun to do homework, to sit in class. We have a lot of hands-on activities. we they explain it nicely. Like, you ask the facilitators a question, you actually get an answer that will be stuck in your brain. Like, ask me a question of one of the things we've learned, I will answer it to you in like, my brain doesn't even need to process the question, I will know the answer. So I think mainly I enjoy that project based learning. It'll actually help you learn without feeling like you're having a huge burden and you only got to do this because society expects you to.
Okay, Shreya. So what I'm hearing is that it's fun, it's practical, and you actually enjoy it. And it's very, very different from rote learning, which you've already done in your previous schools, right? So thank you for sharing that insight. Karun, do you want to tell us what you enjoy about project-based learning?
What I enjoy about project based learning is like we have our own we learn how it helps us. The way we have many types of learnings, we can learn the way that helps us. Like if we don't understand what has been explained and written on the board, when it's too much for us, we can watch videos that explain to us. And even after that, we have to prove it, we have hands-on experiments or projects that help us understand, prove it. So it's like we discovered that fact.
Okay, Karun, thank you for sharing that. And is there one particular moment from your experience at project-based learning, a particular topic that you've studied that really stands out for you?
Something that really stood out to me is I guess the projects, like how we do. When in my old school, we used to only do learning, but here we take all our learning and we make it into something we can show to the people who come. It's like a way we show and we understand. It's like how we take all our learning, put it together to make one project, our final product.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm pretty sure there's a lot of collaboration going on between all the learners to really come up with such projects, right? So that's very interesting. Thank you, Karun. And Aha and Gokul, tell us, what do you feel about project-based learning versus traditional education?
I think we're fans, and a lot of what we do here is very much along the same lines as what a project-based learning approach. From my perspective, what I particularly like about that kind of project-based approach is that it takes an integrative approach to solving problems. Right, the world is not divided up into physics and chemistry lessons or whatever it is, or history separately from geography or whatnot. Right, the world is the world. It's an integrative whole, and I think when you work on projects, you truly have to pull on all of those strands of your learning to make something genuinely happen. So I think that, to me, that integration aspect is a huge benefit that kids might not even recognize now, but that comes into play down the road. And the second thing that I think really attracts me, and this sort of overlaps with my former day job as well, is especially as kids start to get older and do more complex projects, you run the risk of failure in the project, but that failure is actually fruitful. You learn from your failure. Whereas in a traditional system, if you fail to memorize, I don't know, uh, the right hand rule or the left hand rule for for electricity, you failed in that subject, you failed that exam or whatever it is, and you have a stigma attached to it. Here you're trying to build something and it doesn't work, and like, okay, there's 20 different reasons why this doesn't work. Let me actually investigate why it didn't work. So even failure is actually a step forward in learning. And as you do more and more work in teams, and I think that is something that is significantly missing from the mainstream, where it's very much each learner, at their desk looking at their textbook, focusing on their studies. And that bringing people together, I mean, that's how adults work. So why do we make children work in a completely different modality?
I want to add that Gokul teaches project management for adults from learning. So one disadvantage here might be that he might lose adult learners because they actually learn it as kids and are good at it.
Yes, you're a job, down the road. So please don't send your
That's
kids learning.
That's a good world to live in, right? When all children are learning from that particular approach. So I think, from what I understand, in your perspective, learning is more holistic and it's not goal oriented, it's more process oriented. And pass or fail is not the end of it all. The entire goal is to learn, and failure is nothing but feedback, right? So I think that's pretty much because I think in traditional education, it's so based on marks and grades that it can be very I know. I mean, if you pass, you've done well. It doesn't matter if you were really able to learn, but memorization is a very core foundation of traditional education. Yes. Yes, Preeti, please tell us your perspective.
Obviously I'm a big fan, which is why I'm here. But just addressing the what Anaha Gokul said and what Shriya and Karan have expressed, I think that in a conventional school, there is no time that is allocated for a learner to get to the aha moment. The one that Karun was saying, that he has discovered that fact and he has discovered the learning from that fact. That aha moment, there is no time, because I think conventionally the teacher is rushing to finish the syllabus and get to giving the exams in a particular way. So there's no time given for the joy that comes with learning. And I think the power of that joy is what both Shriya and Karun have experienced so far. Somehow this feels like a big promotion of tapas at the moment, but then unfortunately we are lopsided. We are three of us, and then we are going to be talking a little bit about that. But just recognize that learners feel joy when they are given the chance to fail, like what Gokul and Anaha said, and then learn from their mistakes. So we had one anecdote where usually when parents come to tapas, we ask, when we are having the conversations with them, when we have a couple of learners come in and tell their experiences, just like how Shriya and Karuna are sharing in this process. And one of the questions we asked was, how do you treat failure at tapas? Do you know, what do you guys do? I said, what failure? What are you talking about? Because, and then when we reminded them that it was the with the growing of the mushrooms project, they had failed the first time that they had tried. They were like, yeah, it was just another iteration of how we grow things. They did not even perceive it as failure, and that was a big learning for us, because it has become such a big part and parcel of learning that they're not viewing something going wrong as failure, but just another step for eliminating, I can't do it this way, I have to do something different, just like what Gokul said. So I just wanted to share that anecdote as an example of what you said. And over to you, Ankita.
Yeah, thank you, Preeti. I think this is something that also struck a chord with me when I interacted with children at Tapas. They were saying that there's only feedbacks, and we can get feedbacks multiple times and we can come back with multiple iterations. But there is no such thing as failure because there is no limit to the number of iterations, right? So I think that was beautiful to be given a chance to get to, that learning on their own organically. So now a lot of schools obviously are not following project based learning, but then they also have a lot of children going to their schools. So, how do you all think the current education system can evolve to accommodate more child led learning? Because let's face it, we are an ICSE CBSE country. So, how do we then, kind of focus on child led learning in those schools? Um, Anaha, Gokul, do you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is it will definitely take a mindset shift, right? Um, if people don't think there is a need to change, there's never going to be a change.
Mm.
Uh, and if a lot of people think that the status quo is the right way to go, they sort of reinforce that sentiment, which is what we see happen in a lot of the traditional schools. So starting with sowing a seed for that mindset change, right? Educating the educators to see the benefits of the system. And the second is the setup itself, right? When if you have large classrooms where educators simply do not have the chance to understand their learners and interact with them, that isn't going to happen. So it's a grassroots level change that could take
A
many years,
generation.
a
Yeah, I think a
generation
generation
to
or more.
get
Yeah.
to.
And I think the flip side to that then becomes uh, the absolute necessity to encourage experiments like Tapas, like our much smaller center. I think if the schools themselves can't change, then let's create an ecosystem where we let 1,000 flowers bloom. We let all of these different experiments open up and we support them in different ways possible. And what those can look like can vary. But then creating that ecosystem then allows for all of us to grow around the margins, and then hopefully we flow in and we start to change the mainstream. I think that's what my perspective.
Yeah.
Might sound pessimistic. It's not. I promise you, it's optimistic, but maybe tempered with some realism.
Yeah, I also think our generation and the next generation might also think differently because they see learning in a very different way, and it's no more about the marks. With AI in play, information is any which way available, so people are not going to go to school for information now, and I think that probably might bring about a change. I really hope it does. Um, Shreya, you said you've been to many schools, right? So now tell us two things that those schools could do, right, to go to a more child-led learning approach, because now you've experienced the other side at Tapas. So if you had to go back to those schools and make some suggestions, what would you do?
I mean, if I had to go back to the school, I would somehow force my parents to join me back into Tapas the next second. But to be honest, I think out of all the schools I've gone to, which is I don't know how many, um, I think only a few of them maybe had a bit of the changes that could have helped. I mean, one of them certainly when I was in kindergarten, that was helpful. That was fun. Apart from to be honest, they tried to make it hands on. They really tried. I can tell it was fun. It was exciting. They tried to make the kids enjoy learning. It just did not work out. Because sometimes while they tried to make activities, it sort of felt like we were forced to do the activities, even if we didn't like it. In tapas, there's always going to be an activity where in that activity you can figure out if one way of the activity is like there will be multiple ways to do that activity. Say it's sort of like solving a math sum. There are going to be multiple methods to do it, and you can pick whichever one that's easy for you. So in those activities, it was like specific. You have to do it this way. If you don't, that's wrong. You'll lose marks, which is one of the things I hate. So to be honest, I have a few changes. One, they should try to make the activities more up to pace with the kids. Like try to let the learners go in their own pace, because I could tell I did not catch up with those activities. I struggled with them. I hated them. In tapas, the activities are fun, more like projects. To try more hands-on work, because I mean, sitting at a desk and writing in a notebook is the last thing any student wants to see in their life ever again after they leave school. I can tell. I hated that experience of sitting at a desk and writing. And to be honest, the only class I used to like was like that small, rare period of free period where they let us go outside and play. Now I love being in the classroom in tapas. It's so fun, it's so entertaining and so helpful, and like I said, way more practical when they let you learn at your own pace, because I don't think any learner in tapas, or at least in the otters, our class, would want to go to one of the classes in a conventional school where they would put you at a desk, make you write for hours together, and not even get a break at lunch and snack, because they'd say, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have so much work, you got marks. To be honest, just more hands on work, more activities, let the learners learn at their own pace, because huge major problem. by experience. Yeah, to be honest, ask Karun. I don't think he will like to sit at a desk and write for hours. Look at that face. Nope, he doesn't
Yeah.
enjoy it, neither do I, and neither does anyone in Tapas. We might be good at it, but we hate it.
Yeah, I think that's universal across, right? Writing doesn't equal to learning, and then being made to write can really feel torturous. But from what I gather is the aspect of follow the pace of the child, that typically happens a lot during early childhood with so many alternate education methods. But then once the child is into mainstream education, somehow that it kind of loses the whole follow your child, which is my handle. So I think that is something that schools could do more of. Thank you so much. Preeti, apart from whatever's been said, any other suggestions that you have, maybe your 2 cents on what traditional schools could do?
Um, of course, there's a lot in terms of changing the pedagogy itself, like what Shreya said and what Naha and Gokul said. But I'd like to focus on what is really possible is allow the teacher more agency. Allow the teacher to take a call on how learning should look like, because she or he is the one in the class transacting with the students. And if we empower them to make decisions, I think they know their students the best. They will be able to make better decisions of whether it is to follow your child, or to have more hands on, like what Shreya was saying. If we empower that community, I think we have the strongest army possible to take us into the revolution of education, whatever you want to call it. But and that's also an easier change, right? Instead, the pedagogy takes a lot more effort. There's material, there's so much more training that has to happen. But just providing agency is a quick mindset shift, like what Anaha said right at the beginning. It's just that changing of the mindset, and that's easier and more quickly we are able to implement that. So I think for me, that would seem like the top of the priority list when it comes to making the change.
Thank you, Preeti. And I think that's the most doable, like you said, right? Rather than changing the entire thing, at least allow the teachers some autonomy. But that's very, very tricky to do when they're being made to follow lesson plans and teach exactly the same way to every single child. So a lot of adaptation has to happen there. And that could be a first step towards a little more hands on child led learning, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Karun, tell us, what do you think? Two things that other schools could do, which is currently not happening there, or from your perspective, two wonderful things about project-based learning, which any other school could easily do.
Uh, I think what schools can do can be give the students the show them how to learn, like instead of feeding everything to them, may help show them how to learn and let them learn, so then they understand how to do it. like because not all the time we remember, understand, but if we do it ourselves, uh, we will understand, we will remember, because we put all of our effort into it.
Yeah, I think that's a great input because then you're also following your own interest and learning in the way that you'd like to learn. So that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. The next question is for Anaha and Gokul. Please tell us what led you to do homeschooling for your 3 children, and how do you design a curriculum to ensure that your children are also getting well rounded education while homeschooling? Because I think that's one question that a lot of parents who aren't homeschooling ask me, saying, is there a curriculum to follow? You know?
So absolutely, we'll take that from the top.
Yeah.
So I think the way we see it, there are multiple reasons people broadly choose to homeschool. One is their ideological factors, right? They have a certain belief system that might not align with the systems at large. And then there are child specific reasons, interests or needs, however, whatever they may be.
Following your
Um,
own pace, for
yeah.
instance. Yeah.
So in our case, it was a combination of both. So just some background: Gokul used to teach philosophy at Harvard. He's a math undergrad from Harvard, and then he did a PhD there. He taught there. He's basically spent 15 years, 20 years at Harvard and Yale combined. And I think you can take it from there. And
I think the first seed of the idea of homeschooling actually came to us even before we had kids, and it partly came from my observation of teaching some extremely smart undergraduates and graduate students, and we're teaching them philosophy, and specifically Indian philosophy. And Indian philosophy is fundamentally transformative in nature. It seeks to change the way you perceive the world and therefore transform your behaviors and your mindset. And it was very hard to do that to these young adults because there was so much unlearning that had to happen. And doing that, and of course, the result once it happened was very productive, right? But seeing all the effort that had to go in to teach them made me wonder, even before we had kids, in fact, even before we got married, what if we were thinking about schooling right from a very young age in a very different way, something that involved a lot more philosophy, a lot more rigor in thinking in an age appropriate fashion, but giving children essentially the tools to transform their own mindsets, the tools to change their perceptions of the world of reality, to reshape reality from a very young age. That was the initial seed. And I think when I mentioned this to Anaha before we even got married, I'll let her share her
it scared
reaction.
me for sure. So when I first heard him say, "What about homeschooling?" I was like, "You must be crazy." But then the idea definitely grew on me the more we talked about it and discussed. So I think that was followed when we did have kids, and like, the kids got, our eldest got to that age when we had to make a decision. um, we realized she didn't fit a system, right? She had spent so much time out of the system her entire early childhood years.
Plus COVID, so
Yeah.
enhanced by that.
And this time we were again still in the US, and the whole time we were doing a very hands-on approach. She was very much going to all the museums, all the exhibitions, going to farms, a lot of experiential learning at that age. Um, and so when we got to the point where we tried to see if a system would fit, we realized it just didn't make sense for her or for us. So that is one thing. I think also that having thought about it even before they came along, before we had kids, we had a pedagogy and a methodology. So Gokul studied Nyaya Mimamsa, and he had a whole framework and methodology. Following on what Karun said, it was one for investigation and inquisition, right? Teaching, giving them the tools to learn and not telling them what to learn. So we got into experimenting and exploring those techniques with our own kids.
They are the guinea pigs, but don't tell them that.
So,
But I think that was primarily the impetus for why we would homeschool.
but also I think there was this doubt, right, which is reinforced by external factors,
Yeah.
which whether the decision we made to homeschool was the right one or not. So we did consult a psychologist in the US. We did have two of our kids tested. They're both twice exceptional. So those exceptionalities make it all the more reason that homeschooling them makes sense. So the advice that we got, sort of, it was a confirmation that we were on the right track for our children and not just pushing this on them because of our own beliefs. So yeah.
Yeah. But I think it takes guts to do it. It takes a lot of mind space. Because most parents, at least a lot of them who I interact with, they just want the children to go out. After coming back from school also, they're just going out, right? So there's availability is also a factor, I feel, here. And to be that dedicated, it takes a lot, which is why I said it's gutsy to do it. Because then that you're going to have to follow it through, right? At least for a couple of years, and give them the chance to flourish with the homeschooling method. So I think it's very interesting. What about the curriculum part? How do you ensure they are getting well-rounded learning?
So I'm just, for the sake of discussion, I'm going to be a little provocative. I'm going to say something that I don't necessarily agree with the full intensity of what I'm saying. But let me actually question the presumption there in that question, which is that education should be well-rounded. I don't think education itself needs to be well-rounded. I think what we want ideally is for education to help people become their fullest potential, to self actualize and to be self reflective while
So
they
it
do
is
that.
the individual that needs to be well
It's the
rounded.
individual, exactly.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
so,
I mean,
Yeah.
even when you think about corporate hiring and so on, we often talk about people who are spiky, right? That doesn't mean they're prickly, not hard to get along, but it means they have certain things that they're really good at and are pretty good at a few other things as well. So I think education too should, if it is child led, automatically become that way. Your kids, every child has some gift, some passion. And so let them explore that, let them get deeper, make sure other things get covered as and when they're needed. And they'll come up in the most unusual or unexpected contexts. Just to give you an example, our daughter, from a very young age, was very repulsed by violence. So she would have a very like visceral reaction if we ever talked about stories from the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or whatever it is, right? So I don't think even now she knows who the five Pandava brothers are, because she just has so much aversion to talking about that kind of violence in those stories. But she was very interested in the underlying philosophies, and so we had to go with a very philosophical approach to our religious traditions, for it to make sense to her. So we didn't do any history with her. We didn't do any sort of religious, like, mythological stories or anything. She was super interested in languages, so she's doing French and German right now. She does some Sanskrit with me. She learned Yiddish for a couple of months on Duolingo until she got bored. So we let her pursue those passions. We did a lot of economics with her because she was very interested in that. We didn't do any history, so we let her follow her passions because, for one, it made her more satisfied emotionally. But obviously, we are keeping track of what she needs to and where gaps come up. And so, if in an economics lesson an opportunity would come up to talk about a historical event, we'd weave that in, and then say, look, this is how you seem to be interested in currencies. Guess how currency started. Guess how paper money started. And there's all this historical context. And so we find ways to weave in the lessons that we want them to cover. That's our personal approach.
I want to
think,
add to
yeah.
that, on the curriculum side. I think if you look at the larger homeschooling community, all the parents do have that doubt, right? Like, we've made the choice to keep our kids out of the system, so we want to know that they would at least sort of match a grade level competence for what for
Broadly
where they need to
speaking,
be.
yeah.
So yeah, people refer to everything. They refer to CBSE books, ICSE books, IB books, right? Every homeschooler you will ever come across will have a library like this in their home, right? But that doesn't mean that's what they're following, right? Kids can take different exams, they can, but homeschooling parents understand that those are just a reference or a benchmark that we keep track of while we let our kids follow their own path. And to that end, now, in our own center, we've been running classes where we've done a month of like probability and statistics, of financial literacy, of organic chemistry, and I'm talking about all of this for 10-year-olds, right? So we homeschoolers do not care which grade it's supposed to be for. There is no, these kids, our kids and other homeschool kids, they don't associate learning with a place. They don't associate it with a time of the day or a month in the year or a day of the week. Learning is something that happens everywhere and every when. So it is a part of, it's like living and breathing, so it comes to them with everything else. And that's where the distinction is, right? Where the biggest contrast I've seen is when we have a kid who goes to school come and say, oh, but this is a weekend and weekends are not for learning. Right? Or this is a seventh grade concept and I'm a fourth grader, so we shouldn't be talking about it. And that's where those ideas don't exist.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful to understand how fluid it is and how there is so much synergy between all the subjects and the child is learning everything, but also kind of allowed to deep dive into what their interests truly are. So it's a lot more child led, and so much more fluid. I think, like you said, there are no grades. It really depends on if the child's interested. You're going to offer it to the child, irrespective of age or grade. Another beautiful perspective here is learning is everywhere, right? So I think a constant struggle I have with the traditional system. My child is in a Montessori right now, so it's still hands on, and it's a lot of fun for her. She only goes to school for 3 hours, but it's difficult because they really do expect attendance, and I really believe like a lot of learning is out there when you travel. So I think that's another added benefit, because you can really give a lot of experiences outdoors while you travel to your children as well, right? Which
Absolutely.
people might not have the bandwidth to do, because they're so stuck with those schedules, and it's always usually crowded during those schedules to do offbeat things any which
Yes,
way.
that's a big benefit. You can go to museums or whatever on the
Anything in
weekdays.
the middle of the weekend.
Yes. Yes, yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Ankita,
Yes, Preeti.
I just wanted to share one thing that I heard based on what Gokul said right at the beginning. Why should the curriculum be holistic? It's the child who should be living up to their own potential. So I had heard this on this podcast that if Sachin Tendulkar's parents wanted him to be a singer and Lata Mangeshkar's parents wanted her to be a cricketer, we would all be doomed, right? I mean, they would never have
Yes.
become what they are. So I think there is a misconception that a holistic education means that the child is good at everything. That's not possible. It's humanly impossible. So I think that's the misconception that we have to remove, that you expect the child to be great at math, science, languages, everything, and score a 98, 99% as to go into a particular stream or particular college. It's so unfortunate that we are trying to and do this, and in the process losing actually what the child is, losing what they are really good at. So I really endorse that thought and that provocation, and it's going to stick with me. Thank you, Gokul.
I truly think this requires a lot of parent education and awareness too, for them to accept and understand that children are not going to be good at everything, and it's okay for not to not be good at everything. And it's okay for them to just choose something that they truly love and pursue it, and even if at the end it just ends up becoming a hobby, right? That's okay too. Everything does not have to result into a career. I think that is also something that's important to talk about with parents, especially a lot of parents will always have this, at least the ones I've interacted with lately. My child did tennis for like 8 years. I sent him to Padakone Academy, and now he wants to quit. So it's more now the parental ego that is attached to the child's achievement. But the child is like, I'm tired of waking up and going to play. I'm done. I'll go back to it when I want to. I want to do other things. So I think this is going to stick with me too. Yes,
Ankita,
Shri.
add a quick story to that. We talk about kids, but I mean, we've had our own personal experiences with that, which is what prompted us to think in this manner. Which is, I mean, Gokul is a only child. He did go to Harvard,
Pressure.
and he was again outstanding student at Harvard, and he did math and he did physics, but then he wanted to pursue Sanskrit, right? It's like, but why would we send our only child to Harvard and make him do math if he wanted to do Sanskrit at the end, right? Like that was a hard pill for him to swallow, and to the extent that was for his parents to swallow. To the extent that when Gokul and I met, and I met his parents for the first time, they apologized to me. They actually said, "We're sorry, but he chose to go down a different track and follow his passion. We asked him to become a physicist, but he didn't."
Or at least an investment banker. You've done the math right. Please go into iBanking.
Yeah. So
That's
they were like, for this, he could have stayed in India and gone to a Gurukul, but we sent him this far for this. So that's when we said, okay, you know, we can't do this to our kids as well. So the generational trauma ends here.
Yes. Oh my God. I can only imagine that conversation with his parents. Yeah. All right. Shreya, do you want to tell us one project that you did and what learning came out of it, and what was your favorite part about that project?
Um, I can't choose one, but if it had to be one project, I'd say last year's year-long project in this Valley Civilization, it fascinated me a lot. Small thing about me, I love in Indian mythology. I believe it with my heart. I love it. I read those stories. I literally force my grandma to tell me them. My parents have to sit and explain things to me. I love listening to those stories, and I'm just obsessed with Indian history. I love it. And when it comes to dance, especially, I will get in there. I will say it's a pool. If it has dance in it, I am going to be the first one in line ready to dive. I love it. So, to be honest, when we learnt about the Indus Valley Civilization, the IVC, I knew that Tapas was going to be my go to place whenever I needed information. Tapas Library, just go there. Look for anything you want: mythology, fantasy stories, non fiction, science, English, literature, the stuff that teachers read. Everything you'll find it there. To be honest, last year, the year where I was clueless in Tapas, I knew that Indus Valley civilization was going to be something that I would do good in. So, out of all of that, our English project with Samiksha ma'am, who is sadly not in the school anymore, that English project, we had to write our own book. I love reading books. I love writing books. I write my own stories. I write songs when I'm bored. I wrote that book like my life depended on it. I loved that project. And to be honest, in that project, we made a model of IVC. That was my favorite part. I love doing arts and crafts. I enjoy it. I do it in my free time. So I just sat there, I did it. And I was thinking, like, is this a school or is this a summer camp? Is this a school or is this a summer camp? Because normally in summer camps, this is where I have all the fun. And now in school, I'm sitting there doing stuff I like. I'm sitting there pasting a piece of paper on cardboard and carefully trying to balance a roof kind of thingy to try and make a house. And I was enjoying it. So yeah, that might, and the learning from there, I learned that, well, that was the time I learned that everything doesn't need to be done on a desk with a piece of paper and pen and just sitting and mugging everything up, putting it in your brain and vomiting it out on a test paper. It doesn't need to be like that. So I was sitting there. I clearly remember that one day a lot of people were absent. It was just me and a few others. I was sitting there, I was doing my work. We had extra work because we had to finish that project by the time of Varshikotsav, I think. I sat there, I did the project. I was thinking, if things can be so hands on, so easy, and I can learn so practically, then what in the world are other schools doing chaining us to desks? So, to be honest, I learned that hands on works best for me, and that is the way I learn without having to write.
Wow, Shreya, that was super inspiring. I think I want to go back and learn in Indus Valley civilization in another way now, not just having to read it in my textbook. But it's beautiful that the project gave you so much learning about your own learning style and about the education system. I mean, that's quite a profound learning that you got from one single project. Thank you so much for sharing that. Karun, please tell us, what are some challenges that you face in this style of learning, and how do you deal with them? And I mean at Tapas right now, at project based learning, what are the challenges?
There's not too many projects, not even too many. I can barely think of one or two challenges because it's that easy. But the two challenges I face is, first of all, remembering what to learn, what we learned few days back. That's a really big problem for me. So uh, even to take notes, I don't like to take notes also that much. So taking notes helps me. And my second thing that's a problem for me is not is again writing. Like, it's not a problem, it's, for me, I don't like to my hand gets really it pains a lot, I don't know why, when I write. like it's not long period, we don't have that much, but when we are writing essays or anything, it hurts. So how I'm dealing with it is I'm practicing writing. So that problem used to be there before, now it's reducing. Now I can write for a long time, and remembering I take notes.
Can I say something real quick? So
Yeah.
what Karun mentioned about writing, me and Karun we both struggle with writing. I struggle with writing mainly because of COVID. There was a huge gap. My parents didn't send me to school because baby me decided school doesn't work for me. Like traditional school doesn't work for me at least. So this was before we joined the school, before Tapas. Confusing, yes, I know. So there was a huge gap. I did not write for over a year. I had not gone to school. I was like what, in first grade maybe. So I had a huge gap in writing and I struggled with it. After coming to Tapas this year specifically, they are giving us classes for writing, math, everything we struggle with. Me and Karun go together. To be honest, those classes are the best 2 days I look forward to in our week. And ask Karun, I bet it is too. Because that is the time where me and Karun will talk, we will write, and let's just say we both have found a fun way to turn that writing class into a competition and, and see who's better than the other. Karun compete a lot. And I mean a lot, even for the smallest thing, to who gets to stand in line first for lunch, everything becomes a competition. But it's fun, practical, and to be honest, it helps.
Even for going to the class, it's a competition.
Wow. It's
I
nice
have
to
won
see
the last
such
2 times.
healthy competition between you guys. And I think this also I'm just trying to remember how much I have written in my ICSE and CBSE schools. I have permanently swollen, parts in my finger because of the friction from the paper, because of the way I used to write, and it's, when I studied Montessori, I think the first thing that, Maria Montessori says is, why are we making children write or make them straight lines and write ABCs from age of 3 when they will just pick up the pencil and do it effortlessly at 5? Why don't we just wait for their fingers and hands to be ready and work on motor skills that develops grip and arm strength and fine motor skills? So I think I did that with my child, and I think I sort of like healed a little bit of my trauma got healed there, because she started writing only like few months ago. She's 5, and she truly enjoys it. She takes every piece of paper, every post-it that she can find, and she's scribbling, and there is joy in writing. Don't ask me what's going to happen from first grade. I'm still stuck there, but at least for now, it's a delight to watch. So thank you both for sharing that. Preeti, I have a question for you, talking about challenges. What challenges do you face in implementing an unconventional education model in the city of Bangalore, in the country? Please tell us.
I think the biggest challenge is finding the believers, finding the people who will be aligned with you, whether it is from the teaching community or from the parenting community. We've been very mindful of the kind of people who associate with us, because we don't want to get pulled into pressure from parents or pressure from teachers. So the biggest challenge is finding the believers, I think. Secondly, I think none of us know this, because we have all grown up in a conventional system. I think everybody who comes to work with us or comes to be a part of Tapas, the Tapas families also, none of us know what it is when it comes to what this unconventional type of learning is. So anticipating that this is where we have to be and looking at what the future holds and then planning backwards. That's the biggest task, right? How do you even know what the future is going to look like, and what do you need to prepare for, and what are the skills they are going to need at that point of time? Because of this uncertainty, I think that we are constantly evolving. We're constantly looking at what else can we do, what other things can we introduce, how can we change, how can we make something better, calibration. All of this is constantly happening. And so this evolution brings with it its own challenges of constant change. We are in a state of constant change. and people don't respond very well to change, let me tell you. So I think it's the adults that I find to be more difficult and challenging than the students. The learners are ready. Like today we say something, this is new, they're like, let's go, let's do this. uh, Whereas the adults take time to make that change and come there. um, while I say that these are all some of the macro challenges, I think at the level of a day-to-day running perspective, we do see that there are challenges in terms of finding the right resources. Like what Anaha and Gokul were saying, that the student, when they were in the US, they had access to museums, they had access to a lot more experiential spaces that the city itself probably allowed for, whereas a Bangalore city doesn't have as many documented spaces. Like I think they're all very commercial spaces. Even if you look at museums today which have come up, they're all very commercial. So having access to those geographically in the society that we are in is also a day-to-day running issue. And parental pressure is an issue, though we are fortunate, like I think what Shreya and Karun experienced in terms of writing. Um, when there is a lot of pressure about when we have the parent facilitator meets, they're like, okay, can you show me what has been written, or can you show me this documentation, etc. That to a large extent we have you know tried to push back, but that continues to be something that shapes every teacher's mind. So again, we have to go back and educate the teachers and make them feel like they're not consumers. We don't have to treat the parent as if they've bought a service. We have to think of them as the their partners in this journey. So a lot. Ankita, how much time do you have when it comes to talking about challenges? Yes,
Yeah, I
unfortunate,
think
but this is where we are at. And I think there is a whole dichotomy in terms of, should we use technology, shouldn't we use technology? The students are technology natives, we are technology migrants. So obviously, there is going to be that whole confusion of how much technology is right and how much should be introduced, etc. So quite a few conversations, but I'd like to take Karun's stand that I want to say how we are overcoming it. I think every challenge is a conversation. We have to have more conversations around it and make sure that we are getting ready for it. So that's what we are doing at the moment.
Yeah, I think you summed it up beautifully that it's more of a mindset shift required for people to turn into believers and really
Yeah.
trust the process and trust their own child in this process, and allow them to just flourish and learn in their own manner. So, yeah, more conversations, I think, would really pave the way for this. I think one last question for Anaha and Gokul would be, we've spoken a lot about homeschooling, but now I've been hearing a lot about unschooling. So, what do you guys think about unschooling? I think I would love to know your perspective on it.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, the definitions of these terms are quite fluid. Um, and it is very much dependent on each person how they use it. So technically, we are eclectic unschoolers, as long as we're doing child-led learning and we're not following a particular curriculum, and if we don't replicate school at home, then it is no longer homeschooling; it is unschooling. So I think it's become harder to define who is a homeschooler versus an unschooler to
Yeah.
begin with.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's one extreme. The way I would think about it is, excuse me, if you take the mainstream school at one end of the spectrum, when you choose to take your children out of that system and take responsibility for their education, direct responsibility, so to speak, uh, you could call that homeschooling. But the modalities in which you implement that can vary tremendously. Right from, as Anaha said, replicating the classroom at home, except now it's a one-on-one or two-on-one relationship. You follow the same system, the same syllabus. You will take the same NIOS exams year by year. It's a classroom at home. That's it. Right. That's one end of the spectrum, and that works for a lot of people. The other total end of the spectrum would be complete unschooling, which, to be honest, we haven't seen in India. I think that's really something that you might find in parts of the rural US, for instance, where they truly let the kids run wild on their farm or run wild in their woods. Um, I think coming from a country where there's such a push for literacy, we would probably not do that at all in India. There's always that ultimately there's some pressure of how do your kids go to college? And so I don't think that extreme of unschooling will happen in India. But where we are is in
There
more in the
are a lot
middle.
of like travel schoolers. There are
Travel
people
schooling is
who are
very
now
common.
moving to farms. They're buying farms and
Yes.
doing a lot of farm schooling.
Yes.
So the way I would like to put it is, I mean, first of all, there is the means of education and the end goal of education. A lot of time, both the means and the ends are determined by the system when you choose to follow a certain system or a school, whether it's an alternate school or whether it's a traditional conventional school, right? I would say a traditional conventional school a lot of times confuses the means for learning with the end goal of learning, therefore focusing overly on the writing or reading skills. um, a school like Tapas, who is doing project based learning, understands that project based is a method to learn something deeper and allow their kids to follow that. With homeschooling, unschooling, whatever you want to call it, it's a similar sort of distinction, right? When the end goal of that unschooling is overly academic, people might call it more as homeschooling. Whereas when the goal with which the parents are doing it is that whole experiential part where, you know, the
The
social
travel.
emotional, the stability, like the travel, then it's come to be called more as unschooling. So I wouldn't put too much of a focus on the label myself.
Got it. I mean, I had just been hearing these terms thrown around, and I thought you guys would be the perfect, people to kind of clear that for me, because I was like, okay, sounds very familiar, but then again, it's a little different. So, what it truly is, and thank you for clarifying that. Preeti, if we have time for one last question, can you please tell us, according to you, where do you see the future of education heading in the next decade, and how is Tapas preparing for it?
I think there has been the some catalysts that have changed the course of education. The few years ago, I think one of the catalysts was definitely COVID. It made parents realize that what they had been learning, maybe even their parents have learned in school, is exactly what the student is expected to learn today. So I think that that gave a lot of insight to parents that there has to be a change. So I see a rise in the number of people who are looking for alternatives to conventional education. The second catalyst that happened, especially in the Indian context, is the National Education Policy 2020 that came in. I'm so excited for the first time that play was given the kind of space in a policy document, right? The importance of play was there. So I think these two were catalysts in making parents think about education slightly differently. When it comes to the future of education, and this was a conversation I just had before this panel discussion, so we were talking about how in 10 years, most likely there are four scenarios in which schools can exist. One of it is in the same way that we've been doing everything so far. In another way, which could be possibly the tapas route, where the child-led learning is happening. A third way where it can be more of a hybrid schooling system, where there are some which happens online, and then some meetings that happen in person. There is no need for a huge campus as such. And the fourth way where it is completely the unschooling model that Anaha and Gokul spoke about a little bit. So these are the four scenarios that may evolve in terms of how schooling looks like. But one thing is a given, that the skills that we are expected to teach in school is going to change. No longer will the academic knowledge be celebrated, because already you have the top few companies in the world like Google who have done away with looking at certificates and looking at degrees for their hiring, which means that those certificates, that college degree is no longer going to be valid. What are you going to study for? The skills that are required, and this is what the World Bank report talks about, what the skills are, top skills are that hiring people who hire are looking at, is hardly taught in schools today, and which is your creativity, collaboration, your communication, these top three four skills. And I think we will be forced to make sure that we have place for these skills as an education in the macrosphere. We will be forced to look at those skills, otherwise we will be left behind in the world economy. We are going to be the ones who are most underperforming because we don't have the skills to do it. So I think the future of education is looking more and more personalized and something like your handle, Ankita, which is follow your child. I think we all have to learn to respect the learner, and this is a cornerstone of tapas, that the learner is somebody today. We're not preparing them for a tomorrow. They are somebody today, and they have a voice, they have a choice, and this is something that will contribute to how the world is going to shape. So, with that in mind, we need to look at the future of education.
Yeah, and I think I'm truly excited for Gen Beta and the next generation after that because they will truly maybe witness that shift. But it's also going to be very interesting because these are, like you said, they're going to be very technologically also advanced, involved, exposed. So it's
Yeah.
going to be very interesting to see how that evolve. And I'm just lucky that we're going to be alive to see that shift. Maybe more policies, maybe more work to be done there. But I think this is very interesting. Whatever's going to happen. So, anybody, any last thoughts before we wind up? I think this has been really interesting for me and a privilege to moderate a conversation with all of you here. Thank you, Anaha and Gokul, Shreya, Karun, and Preeti for having me today.
I just wanted to share that this is a disclaimer. Shreya and Karun were not prepped to be promoting the.
Uh, from our side as well, deep thanks to Tapas Project Shala for inviting us and for having us share our opinion. I think we're basically, in a sense, we are on the same path together. We're on, we're doing similar things for our children. You're doing some things for your learners, and so it's really exciting and heartening for us to see the incredible innovations in pedagogy that Tapas has brought about. Honestly, one of the reasons we moved back to India was because we were feeling very stifled in the US in terms of how little change or innovation was happening. Frankly, regression was happening. And it is so heartening for us and so exciting for us to see the kinds of truly innovative schools that we're finding in India right now, Tapas being, I think, at the forefront of them. And it gives us a real, sense of hope and optimism for the future. So thank you for allowing us to be here and being part of your journey as well.
Absolutely. And I think just to add to that, one of the first things we say when people come and ask us, should we homeschool? What do you think about homeschooling? Is it like that there is so much innovation happening here in alternate education that it's very nice to see. So we've actually asked them to come check out your school and other schools like it to see if it's a good fit for them first. Uh, I think this is the direction. I know, Ankita, you asked Preeti where education is heading in 10 years. For us, alternate schools like Tapas is where it should be heading. So if
Yeah.
anyone ever comes to us and asks, where should we go, then this is the sort of environment you want for your child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad we have a space like this in Bangalore. And I really hope there's many more, tapas schools that open up across India, and more learners get to witness project-based learning.
My request, I think, my wish that I'm going to leave this panel discussion is we are no longer called alternative and we become the mainstream. This is how
Yes.
education should look.
Yeah,
Exactly.
this has to become the norm. Yes.
Yes.
It will become the norm. Not
We
stopping
need,
till
we
it
need
does.
people like
It
you,
has to.
Shreya.
I love Priya and Karun's energy. I think
Yeah.
we need kids with your energy.
And these are the kids who are going to shape the future, like you
Exactly.
said. So with
I
more
think
minds.
I'm just a bit hyper this morning.
We love your energy, though. Thank you so much. You and Karun balanced each other pretty well.
We have to balance each other, or one of us are going off the rails.
I,
One of us,
I've been
that
I've
one of
been
us,
trying I've been trying to stop the derail from a long time.
we are going to have a talk tomorrow.
Exactly.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. Have a wonderful Sunday and hope to connect with you all soon sometime.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being a wonderful moderator, Ankita. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed this session.
Me too. All right. Bye.
Hi.
Bye. How do I cut?